Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Ruven here in Jerusalem, Israel, from the Temple Institute. Today is the 16th day of the month of Shvat, 5780, February 11th, 2020. This coming Shabbat, we're reading Parshat Yitro from Exodus 18:1 to 20:23. It's a big parsha. We've heard about the deal of the century. You've been hearing about that lately? Well, Parshat Yitro introduces the deal of eternity, the eternal covenant, the Torah at Mount Sinai, the covenant between the God of Israel and the people of Israel. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but first I want to ask everyone, how was your Tu B'Shvat this past Sunday night, Monday, meaning yesterday? In the Hebrew calendar was Tu B'Shvat, the 15th day of the month of Shvat. Of course, the New Year for trees, we've been talking all about it. New Year for trees in terms of tithing in the times of the Holy Temple. May it be soon. And many of those tithes, in fact, all of those tithes are still observed today in a symbolic way, in a actual real way, but as a zikaron, as a memory for a remembrance of the Holy Temple. But they are observed, even though there is no Holy Temple. And they will be observed as they were intended in their full form when the Holy Temple is rebuilt. And of course, as we've mentioned, Tu B'Shvat, this day of planting trees here in Israel. What did I read? 250 million trees have been planted in Israel over the past century. Phenomenal. And there are also different, there's a Seder, a Kabbalistic Seder that was developed in the 16th century, originated by Rabbi Yitzchak Luria of blessed memory. And many people here in Israel observe that each year. Many beautiful things that take place on Tu B'Shvat when we eat from the fruits of the species of the land of Israel. And of course, there's that whole cosmic injection of energy that we, along with the trees, all of creation receive on the 15th, a wake-up call to get ready for the upcoming season of spring. And of course, the upcoming season of spring in the natural world is also accompanied by, well, a month from yesterday, a month from Tu B'Shvat is, of course, Purim, and a month following that is Pesach/Passover. So we're just getting warmed up here for the exciting events that will be coming in the upcoming months, and they're going to be here faster and sooner than you expect. It's always that way. Pesach, Passover always creeps up on us, and there's so much preparation to do. It's still 2 months away, but we're getting ready, and we will be dealing with that full-time very soon. This week, Parshat Jethro, right? Yitro, the amazing father-in-law of Moshe. We read about how Yitro welcomed Moshe into his house after Moshe rescued his 7 daughters from some hostile shepherds at the well in Midian, and how he married Moshe off to his daughter Tzipporah. They had 2 sons, Gershon and Eliezer. And then, of course, Moshe stops at the burning bush. God speaks to him, sends him back to Egypt to free God's people. And we all know what happened since then, but he said goodbye at the time to Yitro, and we haven't heard from him since. And all of a sudden, in this week's Parsha, after Israel has left Egypt, after Israel has crossed the Yam Suf, the Sea of Reeds, after Israel has received the manna in the desert, the bread, lechem min shamayim, the bread from heaven that appears each morning with the morning dew. And after Israel met up with Amalek, who ambushed them along the way with no reason, just out of spite, out of hatred, just trying to put a spoke in God's plans. And Israel was able to overcome Amalek. And now This week's Parshat Yitro begins Exodus 18:1, and we read Yitro, the Kohen Midian, the high priest, let's say, of Midian, the father-in-law of Moses, Moshe, heard everything that God did to Moshe and to Israel, his people, that Hashem had taken Israel out of Egypt. And Yitro, the father-in-law of Moshe, took Tzipporah, the wife of Moshe, after she had been sent away, and her 2 sons, of whom the name of one was Gershom, for he, Moshe, had said, I was a sojourner in a strange land. Ger means a strange land. Eretz Nochri. And the name of the other was Eliezer, for the God of my father came to my aid. Eli, El Avi, Azarli. And he saved me from the sword of Pharaoh. Okay, so Yitro appears all of a sudden. And Yitro is very excited. He meets up with some people. He says, I'm Moshe's father-in-law, and they call for Moshe. Moshe, he bows down. He gives him utmost respect. They kiss. How are you? And Yitro says, I've been hearing all about the amazing things that God has done for you. It's done for the people of Israel. And you know what? He said, God is a greater God than all the others. And why would Yitro say this? Because Yitro, as we know, was a scholar, a world expert on avodah zarah, on idol worship, and he knew them all. And he knew from east, west, north, south, all the different idolatries. And he studied it, and he practiced it, and he was searching for the real answer, for the true God. And only now, he says, well, like this, I see that this God that led Israel out of Egypt, that destroyed the Egypt army, that brought them across the Sea of Reeds, that feeds them manna, I see that this is the one and only God. It's interesting because the word that's used in chapter 18, verse 9, it says in Hebrew, it says, Vayihad Yitro al kol hotova asher asa Hashem liYisrael asher hitzilo miyad Mitzrayim. In English, it is Yitro rejoiced over all the good that Hashem had done for Israel, that he had rescued it from the land of Egypt. Vayichad Yitro, that's how it opens. Vayichad is a word meaning, and he rejoiced. Vayichad. But the word Vayichad also can mean, it's from the word Echad, one, united, individual. And I think it's very telling that this word's used here, because in his joy, Yitro is testifying to the oneness, the unity of God in the world, and that God is one, indivisible. There's no 2 powers in the world. There's no many powers. There's God, and God only. And that is the revelation that Yitro has received simply from watching what's been going on, from paying attention to life. It's a good way to plug into Hashem and to get that there's one God in the world. Just being alert, paying attention, connecting the dots, and that's exactly what Yitro did. So they meet. They have a meal together. They with Aaron as well, and the elders. A very, very mechubad, very, very honorable get together. Yitro makes some offerings to the one God of Israel. It's all very beautiful, very sweet, and bodes well for our people. And then the next day, it seems, Yitro observes that Moshe is got a little stool. He's sitting there in the noonday sun, where he's been sitting since dawn, and he'll be sitting there until it gets dark. And there's a big long line of Israelites who are waiting each for a turn to talk directly with Moshe. And Yitro, at the end of the days, he says, what was that all about? And he goes, well, I'm the judge here. I'm the shofet, and the people come. They all have issues. Everybody's got things they need to deal with. And they come to me, and I solve their problems. And Yitro says, well, this is no good, all day out and every day, all day, every day, out in the sun, people waiting online. It's not going to go well. You can't do it alone. It's just not a good system. He said, teach the law, teach the rules, teach the Torah to other people, to good men who are righteous men who despise the idea of any kind of irregularity, of accepting any kind of bribery, men who would flee from that, and appoint men who can be judges over 100 people, 50 people, 10 people, and then they'll take the lesser cases, and the ones that they can't solve, people will go to you. Moshe adopts this, and it works great. It's a great system, and the bureaucracy is cut down, and people have a life again. Okay, very interesting concept here, because he got Yitro. He's not part of the tribe. He's not a Jew. He's not an Israelite. Yet he is the father of our Sanhedrin. He's the father of our legal system. He shaped the way our courts are created. He defined what are the criteria of honorable, honest, good judges who, with every decision they make, they see before them the pit of hell if they make the wrong decision, and they see before them the beauty of Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, if they make the right decision. And as we're told in the Zohar, there's a sword at the back of their neck that's threatening them. If they don't make the right decision, all this means is that every decision that they make, everything they do, has such an effect on people's lives that they have to take every decision, every judgment with the utmost seriousness, not only as it will, the ramifications it will have on the people they're judging, but on themselves. They have to feel with every decision they make that it's life or death for them. For them, it's life or death. That is what a real judge is all about. And this is all Yitro. This is all his idea. So we owe to this man our legal system. We owe to this man the system by which we take the Torah and can make it applicable in life day by day. A very, very great debt of gratitude we owe to this man, Yitro, who is just an amazing character, an amazing individual that he only appears a few times in the Torah. He'll appear again once more in the book of Numbers. But who he was and what he was about, and the significance that he has for the nation of Israel and for the Torah of Israel is just incredible. And he is also a archetype of the relationship that the nation of Israel has with non-Jews, righteous Gentiles, with people who attach themselves to the nation of Israel and to the God of Israel, and certainly have what to offer to the nation of Israel, because they have a standing now. These people certainly have what to offer because they get it. They understand. And they love the God of Israel, they love the nation of Israel. And the prototype for this individual is Yitro. There was an earlier prototype all the way back in the book of Genesis, and that was Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, who was a dedicated servant and who was the man who found Yitzchak, Isaac, found his bride, Rivka, and without Eliezer, we don't know what would have happened. We might not be here. So these individuals from the nations are of such importance, such significance, and have such an honorable role in the history and the life and in the everyday of the nation of Israel that we salute them. And we certainly salute Yitro, who is just an incredible individual. So now Yitro's done his parts. We're back, the portion, the Torah reading begins to focus now on preparations for Mount Sinai. Israel has left Rephidim. It points this out. We've journeyed from Rephidim. Of course, Rephidim was where Israel encountered Amalek, and where Israel had to overcome Amalek. And we know that when Moshe, when his arms were raised and his staff was raised heavenward, that the people looked up, and they looked up toward the heavens and were inspired, and they became confident and full of trust in Hashem and belief in Hashem, and they were able to overcome Amalek. If they looked away, then Amalek would grow stronger. So, of course, what we're being told here is that you got to believe, and you have to have trust in Hashem, and that is where our strength comes. That is, that's the whole deal. You got to keep the connection between ourselves and the God of Israel. Keep looking toward heaven and do what you have to do. In this case, they had to fight. But God was with them, not in the same way that God fought for them when they left Egypt and they crossed the sea and God drowned the Egyptians in the sea. No, God's teaching Israel now, you got to fight for yourselves. But if you fight and you trust in me, I'm there by your side, and you will be victorious. So, coming off of that victory, Israel now arrives in the desert of Sinai. And it says in chapter 19, verse 2, it tells us that they journeyed from Rephidim and have arrived in the wilderness of Sinai and encamped in the wilderness, and Israel encamped there opposite the mountain. And in Hebrew it is Vayis'u me Rephidim vayavo midbar Sinai vayachanu bamidbar vayichan sham Yisrael neged ahar. Okay, they traveled from Rephidim, they came to the desert of Sinai, vayachanu, and they encamped in the desert. And then it says, right after that, vayachanu bamidbar, it says vayichan. Same order as vayachanu, but vayichan is singular. Vayichan sham Yisrael neged ahar. So at first it tells us that the entire people encamped there, and then it repeats that, but it says vayichan in the singular. They camped as one. And as Rashi tells us, and as our sages tell us, they camped, they were united, they were with one heart. And this was the prerequisite for receiving Torah at Sinai. They didn't even know what was coming next, but they were united. And, you know, last week's Parsha, Beshalach, they left Egypt, and they crossed the sea, and there was lots of ups and downs. They were scared, they were frightened, they were hungry, they were thirsty. Sometimes they were singing the praise full-heartedly, wholeheartedly to Hashem, and sometimes they were getting ready to stone Moshe because they were really hungry and really thirsty. It was tough. You know, they were newly liberated, and, you know, they didn't really know what was in store for them. Now, however, things have settled down a bit. They have the man every day. Their stomachs are full. You know, it's always important, as they say, en kemach in Torah. You have to have bread in order to fulfill the Torah. You can't fulfill the Torah on an empty stomach, because people need sustenance. That's key. You can't ask of people to die. In fact, it's forbidden to die because for the Torah, because we're told, we're commanded, as we read in the book of Deuteronomy, we're commanded to live by the Torah, not to die by it. So now the people are in a much better place, and they are united. So now Moshe began, and God's talking to Moshe. They're making preparations. God's making preparations for this big event that only He knows about, it seems, at this point. And He says to Moshe, "You see what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and I brought you to me. And now, if you obey me and keep my covenant, you shall be to me a treasure, Am Segula in Hebrew, of all peoples. For mine is the entire earth, and you shall be to me a kingdom of princes," or actually, I'm reading a translation, a kingdom of Kohanim, a kingdom of priests, Kohanim, in the temple, and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the children of Israel. So God is now, he's got his people where he wanted them. This is the place where he wanted to bring them. This was the 3-day journey into the desert that Moshe first asked Pharaoh to allow. This is the meeting place. This is where it's all going to come down. This is where it's going to happen. And God is beaming. God's beaming. His people are here. You know, they're here. They're united. He wants to make to them an amsgula, a treasure. You know, sometimes Israel's referred to as a chosen people, you know. And people say, who are they? You know, do they think they're better than us? No. First of all, chosen people, that expression is not used here. It's often translated as that, but here it's translated, from where I'm reading, a treasure out of all the peoples. But in Hebrew, it's amskula. Skula is it's a special thing. It's a treasured thing. It's a thing that one holds close to their heart. It's something that someone might dote on. You know, it's important. It's special. That we're special to God. And when people say, well, what makes you special to God? What about my people? Well, you know, any people, and every people special to God. Every people has to find how they shine and how they can work with God. But every nation can be an amskula. Here, in our book, in our Torah, God says to the people of Israel, you are my amskula, you are my treasured nation, my treasured people, and a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Well, you know what? You may say, well, you guys think you're so big, you're so special. But you know what? This is a big responsibility. It's not simply a case of being a favored, God likes us best. No. God is giving us and getting us ready right here in these words. He's getting Israel ready for a tremendous, tremendous responsibility toward God, toward itself, and toward the world, toward the nations, in what will be the receiving of Torah, which we are going to talk about as soon as we return for part 2 of Temple Talk. Thanks for being with me. I'll be right back. Temple Talk. Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven, speaking from Jerusalem, Israel, on behalf of the Temple Institute. Today is the 16th day of the month of Shvat, 5780, the 11th of February, 2020. We've been talking all about Parshat Yitro and Mount Sinai, Har Sinai, receiving of Torah, the deal of eternity. You know, there's understanding that God offered the Torah to many nations. Israel wasn't the first, and every nation had a problem with it. One said, "What? It says no murder, you can't kill. It's not for us. We can't live by that." Another said, "No stealing. That's not for us," etc., etc. You know, it sounds very fantastical, but imagine if God were looking for a nation to receive Torah today. I mean, the Palestinians. You know what response God? I don't want to say what response. You know what kind of response the deal of the century got. Can you imagine the deal of eternity? We can't even repeat what might be spoken as a response. Can you imagine the European Union? So are you kidding? Where's the multiculturalism? Where's the multi-genderism? Where's the animal rights? There are animal rights, by the way, in Torah, but not of the kind that the European Union might dream of. Can you imagine the French? It says no adultery. These nations today who would accept it? Am Yisrael, the people of Israel, accepted it, and they said, whatever God tells us, we're going to do. And how do we know that? Because right after God spoke with Moshe, what we talked about at the end of the first half of the show, in which he said he had a covenant that he wanted to make with the people. We read in chapter 19, verses 7 and 8. The people's response is, Moshe came and summoned the elders of the people and put before them all these words that Hashem had commanded him. The entire people responded together and said, everything that Hashem has spoken, we shall do, sight unseen. They hadn't heard a word yet directly from God, but they were on board, and Moshe brought back the words of the people to Hashem. And then Hashem describes to Moshe what's going to happen next. This big sound and light celebration, a big happening here. I think a lot of people in America at least, and around the world, I imagine, just saw the Super Bowl. You know, there's a lot of fanfare. There's a lot of fancy stuff, effects, and the halftime show. I'm going to go into the halftime show. It seems to get looter and looter each year, but none of these events, no big rock and roll, anything, nothing holds a candle to this. This was God speaking, God expressing his inexpressible love for the people of Israel. This is the moment that God's been waiting for. This is the reason God created creation. This is what it's all about, this covenant with the people of Israel, which ultimately will bring about a change in the world and lead toward the perfection of the world. So there is lightning, and there's thunder, and there's smoke, and there's fire, and the mountain is shaking, and there's a sound of a shofar, and it's getting louder and louder and louder. And God tells Moshe to make a fence around the mountain so that people can't come too close, because there's no telling what might happen. God is just so present and so exuberant that he wants there to be a little bit of space, physical space, between him and the people so that nobody gets hurt. And they take all these precautions. 3 days they have to prepare. The men separate from the women. The clothes are laundered. And on the third day, Moshe goes up to the mount, comes back down with the 10 commandments. And of course, that first commandment is, I am Hashem, your God, who has taken you out of the land of Egypt from the house of slavery. And people might say, that's a commandment? Well, first of all, it didn't say, I am Hashem, your God, who created the world. It said, I took you out of Egypt. Because this is really, the first commandment is to understand this, to accept this, to believe this, to live this every day, to remember it every day, to teach it to our children. This is a very, very, very full living commandment. The commandment that Hashem is our God, who took us out of Egypt and out of slavery and brought us to freedom, and that freedom is embodied by this covenant. This covenant is really the fulfillment of our liberation from Egypt. This is what it's all about, just getting into the desert and not having to work 7 days a week from before the rising of the sun to way after the sun sets. Just getting out of that. That gained Israel some physical respite from the bondage of Egypt. But the real freedom is here. This is what it's all about, this Torah, this covenant with God. This is our ticket, this is our diploma, this is our marriage license to Hashem and to a whole new way of life. And we're not alone in the world, and we're not intended to be alone in the world, and we are going to be learning, and we to learn to this day what this covenant is all about, and every day we can discover a new facet of its of its meaning, of its intention, and how it can lead to our freedom, not just from Egypt of then, but from the Egypt and all the things that tie us down today. This covenant known as Torah is our pass to living as free men and women. And that's what this tryst between Israel and God at Mount Sinai is all about. And it ends after the giving of the Ten Commandments. The Parsha ends with these verses from chapter 20, verses 19 to 23. And all the people saw the voices and the torches, the sound of the shofar, and the smoking mountain. And the people saw and trembled, so they stood from afar. Of course, I've explained this in the past, that they said they saw the sound of the shofar, that they were actually seeing sound. That's how powerful and moving and reality shattering this experience was, that they were seeing sounds and they were hearing sights. Their senses were so overwhelmed and overcharged by all this. And then God continues to say, "You shall not make images of anything that is with me. Gods of silver or gods of gold you shall not make for yourselves. An altar of earth you shall make for me, and you shall slaughter beside it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your sheep and your cattle. Wherever I allow my name to be mentioned, I will come to you and bless you. And when you make for me an altar of stones, you shall not build them of hewn stones, lest you wield your sword upon it and desecrate it. And you shall not ascend with steps upon my altar, so that your nakedness shall not be exposed upon it." So after the Ten Commandments, after this cosmic revelation, after this reality shattering, nothing's ever going to be the same again, ever. After this experience, and the people are still, they're dizzy. They're dizzy from all this. They're seeing voices. They're overcharged. Their cup runneth over. After all this, God turns it down a little. He slows the tempo down a bit. He brings it back to earth. He says, "Okay, when you make for me an altar," meaning you're going to make for me an altar. It's not exactly worded as a tzivui, as a commandment, but when you make for me an altar, it will be this kind of altar, out of stone. Simple. It's not going to be something cosmic. It's not going to be, something that comes down from heaven. You're going to make it from stones from the earth, unhewn stones. You're going to make it out of stone, out of earth. And you're going to make offerings for me, and I'll be there. And that will be for us, for me, your God, and for you, my people. That will be a meeting place for us. That will be where we can connect via my presence, via your presence, and via these offerings. What is so beautiful about this? Well, is this a new idea? Did God create it? Did God come up with this right now? Did God come up with the idea of building an altar? No. We know that man has been building altars to God from time immemorial. We know from Midrash that Adam, after he ate from the fruit of the tree of knowledge, that he built an altar to atone for what he had done. We know that Cain and Abel built an altar. We know that Noach built an altar. We know that Avraham, we know that Yitzchak, we know that Yaakov, they built altars to Hashem. This was man's way. This was man's earliest way to connect with Hashem. It came from man, and it was so dear to God that man had come up with this, that man so much wanted to be close to God, wanted to communicate and be one with God, that man came up with this concept of an altar and of offerings, that God, he endorses it, he adopts it. He says, "I love this. I love what you have done as human beings. I love this gesture, and we're going to make it part of our covenant, part of our relationship." Very beautiful. Very, very beautiful. And it closes, the parsha closes, and you shall not ascend with steps upon my altar, so that your nakedness shall not be exposed upon it. If we think about the concept of nakedness, we have to go all the way back to Adam. Remember Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, they ate from the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and all of a sudden they looked and we're naked. So they hid. They hid from God. Okay? So here, this altar, this meeting place, is the epitome of coming out from hiding, of being with God, of being right there, right in God's view. So the idea of nakedness as a reason to hide has to be put aside. So God does not want this nakedness to have any play here. So when we build the altar, and the altar in the Holy Temple, of course, was quite massive and had a very long ramp that led up to it, that the Kohanim, the priests, would ascend and descend when bringing offerings or when arranging the fires for the offerings and other ceremonies that were done throughout the year in the Holy Temple. And it was a smooth ramp that they would ascend and descend. There were no steps, just as it is described here. So I just am always moved by this these closing words of Parshat Yitro, because following the grandeur and the glory and the pyrotechnics of Mount Sinai and the giving and receiving of Torah, we have this very, very simple, earthy, basic description and gesture, really, from Hashem. It's almost he's saying, listen, we can do it. I know I've given you what to think about. I know there's a lot that I've shared with you right now, but we're still on the same page, and we can do this, and we can make this happen. We can make this work. And of course, we've been making it work and working on making it work for many, many thousands of years since that moment. I want to change the subject because I think we've drawn to a close here for now. I just want a little update here. The Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee, which is Israel's largest lake, for many years now, until last year, or many years where we had drought. And the level of the lake kept going down and down and down. And it was getting perilously low. In fact, the Israel Water Authority, has a high water mark and a low water mark, and even below that, a lower water mark, where anywhere below that, you can't pump out any water for drinking or other use out of the Kinneret, out of the Sea of Galilee, because it could lead to salinization of the water that's in there, be very dangerous, irreparable. This year we've had so much rain, and right now we are just finishing getting past a storm front in which a lot of rain has fallen and some snow in certain places here in Israel, because it's very cold. Even in Jerusalem it's very cold, and I think there have been some flurries here. The Kinneret today is so full, everybody's talking about it. It's right now it's about 4 feet from the top level. If it gets above that, then you have flooding. And if it gets above that, then they open up a dam and it starts to flow into the Jordan River, which then flows down into the Dead Sea. And it probably will, there's a good chance that will happen later this spring, when all the snows that are on Mount Hermon and other places in the north start to melt, and all that water starts to head toward the Kinneret. Anyway, the level is at currently 210.04 meters, 689 feet below sea level. Now, the entire terrain there is below sea level. It's about a meter 75, 5.74 feet higher than at the start of January. So it's gone up almost 6 feet since the beginning of January. which is a lot. I mean, it's a big lake. 6 feet is a lot of water. Rain since early January has been so plentiful that if the downpours predicted for the rest of this week take place, I'm reading from an article in Times of Israel right now, the water level could soon rise by about 1.25 meters, another 4.1 feet, at which point a city accustomed to worrying about drought would be at risk of flooding. And the article goes on to say, if flooding looks possible, authorities will intervene. If water is near the upper red line of 208.8 meters below sea level, they will open a dam at Kibbutz Degania, allowing waters to flow into the Jordan River, which has not happened since 1992. That's how long the dry spell lasted. But thank God we have been blessed and are being blessed, and the water level is very high, and it's a very beautiful sight. People are going from all over Israel to see it. Very, very beautiful sight. And what else is happening here in Israel? Well, you know, we have elections coming up, the third in less than a year, coming up in 3 weeks. And the political deadlock seems to be continuing. Of course, the new thing thrown into the mix was the deal of the century and the pressures on Prime Minister Netanyahu to start annexing the land, the Jordan Valley, and the Israeli towns and villages outside the Green Line, all of which is described as the first stage of the deal of the century. And our Prime Minister was all ready to do it when he first came back from Washington, but then the Trump administration put the brakes on it and said not so fast. And that's created a lot of frustration here in Israel in the right, because people want it to happen, and people are nervous that the right doesn't form the next government, and it might not happen at all, which would be a horrible, horrible tragedy, really, because it would mean that we had an opportunity to further establish our hold on the land and to dig our roots deeper and to build and to populate the land. And if we don't take advantage of that, it's a horrible tragedy. It certainly is. So, of course, we want a right-wing government to lead the next government, but the country seems to be so endlessly deadlocked that it's hard to tell. And you know, there are deep state forces that are conspiring as best they can in preventing another right-wing government from being formed. So everybody here, if you're listening and you are voting for the right and you want the sipuach, the annexation of the Jordan Valley, and you want the shuvim to come under Israeli law completely, and the building to continue and development to continue, well, this is my pitch. You got to vote for a party that's going to support that. And what else is happening here? Well, Temple Mount is always in the news. It's also a lot of talk about it since the announcement of the deal of the century. Of course, the contradictory clauses in the deal of the century. One's calling for the continuation of the status quo, and one's saying for freedom of prayer for everybody on the Temple Mount. Of course, status quo, there's no freedom there. And we are always working toward the freedom of prayer. And at the same time, our Palestinian associates who claim day and night how important and how holy the Temple Mount is to them are trying very desperately to create violence and protests on the Temple Mount in order to express their disinterest in the deal of the century. Very, very beautiful sight. We're drawn to a close of our show. I just want to say something which we don't say too often on the show, but you know what? I'm going to say it. You, listener, each and every one of you, you are invited. You're all invited to become active partners in building the Holy Temple, building our shared future, and building a house for God, a meeting place between man and God, a meeting place for the nations. And of course, you can do so by making a donation to Temple Institute, because the work of the Temple Institute is to bring the actual building of the Holy Temple closer and closer and closer until we're doing it. And we do that, we have done that by creating the vessels, and we have done that by teaching, and We have, of course, our exhibit in the old city of Jerusalem, which people come, hundreds of thousands of people each year come and see the actual vessels that we've recreated, vessels that are kosher, fit for the third temple. They're ready for use. We just have to build a temple. We do this by bringing people to the Temple Mount. We do it by education, and it's happening. It's happening, it's the Holy Temple. It's the next best thing. And as President Trump said in his State of the Union address, the best is yet to come. And that really is the Holy Temple. It's the best is yet to come. And it's, I believe, around the corner because, things are moving at a dizzying speed around the world, and especially here in Israel, as the words that the Hebrew prophets spoke thousands of years ago just seem to be falling into place day by day here. And you can make your donation at templeinstitute.org/donate.htm. Well, thanks for being with me. I've had a great time myself. I hope you have too. Temple Talk.